These are the lecture notes for Chapter 8, the nervous system. And there are many learning outcomes associated with this chapter. So I want to help you understand how to focus on your studying. We are going to talk about the function of individual neurons and how they generate action potentials or nerve impulses. So we will learn some anatomy and physiology associated with generating an action potential. But then we will learn a little bit more about the structure of the brain. We'll focus a lot on, we'll go into a lot of detail on the structure of the brain, the different parts of the brain and what they do. Because honestly, I think it's incredibly fascinating. So personally, I feel it is. So I think it's important for you to know how your brain works, at least have a general knowledge of how the brain works. We won't focus as much on the spinal cord. We will talk about it, how it's organized and that kind of thing. We will go into the different divisions of the nervous system, like the parasympathetic division and the sympathetic division. And we'll go ahead and get started. So you can obviously know that when I highlight something, it's important. I try to highlight, areas that I'm going to talk about more. So just focus on the highlighted areas of the notes, because I know this is a long chapter again, like chapter 6. So, okay, so let's talk about the nervous system. And you can't really talk about the nervous system or learn about it without comparing it to the endocrine system, because these are the two body systems that are, their role is to coordinate and control the other body systems, the other organ systems. So the two coordinating systems are the nervous system and the endocrine system. So even though the nervous system is by far the most complex organ system, I want you to know the basic differences. So with the nervous system, the responses are fast and brief, and they can be very specific in their target. Endocrine system responses are controlled by hormones that travel through the blood, whereas the nervous system responses are controlled by neurotransmitters that generate electrical impulses. So obviously electricity is going to travel faster than hormones moving through the blood, even though the bloodstream, blood pressure can cause transport to be pretty quick. It's still going to be slower than electrical transport, So the responses of the endocrine system are slower, but they last longer, and often the effects are more general and actually harder to understand sometimes. But the nervous system is what we're focusing on in this chapter. There are three main functions of the nervous system. Basically, the first function is a sensory function. The nervous system monitors the body's internal and external environments. And then the third function is a motor function. So coordinates voluntary and involuntary responses to the sensory information. And then the second function is the integrating the sensory information, deciding what to do with it kind of thing. And that function occurs in the central nervous system, which is the brain and the spinal cord. Now, it's real important that you look at this chart and understand it. This is how the nervous system is organized. So we have two main branches of the nervous system. We have the CNS, central nervous system, which consists of the brain and the spinal cord. Then we have the PNS, or peripheral nervous system, which is all the nerves and nervous tissue that lie outside the brain and the spinal cord. You can see the central nervous system is shaded in white or light gray, and then the PNS is shaded in kind of yellow. So within the peripheral nervous system, you have the afferent division, which is the sensory division, brings in information from somatic receptors and visceral receptors. Basically, the somatic receptors monitor the outside world and our position in it, and visceral receptors monitor internal conditions, because visceral refers to like our internal organs and somatic refers to well, it's just referring to the outside world and like I say, our position in it. But the somatic sensory information is going to lead you to do something with your skeletal muscles usually. If, for example, maybe one of the sensory receptors of the somatic division is in your skin, and it detects the sensation of heat. All right, so you touch something that's too hot, that's going to burn you. That sensory information goes to your central nervous system and tells your somatic nervous system, the motor division, to tell your skeletal muscles to move your hand away from the hot stove or whatever it is that you touched. So somatic is just somatic sensory and the somatic motor division are kind of related to activities that we're going to end up doing with our muscles, our skeletal muscles, if you wanted to generalize it. The efferent division is the motor division. So this is going to be commands that come from the central nervous system to either the somatic nervous system, which tells your skeletal muscles what to do, or the autonomic nervous system, which is more involved in your visceral organs, your internal organs, your heart, your glands. So the autonomic nervous system is then divided into the parasympathetic and sympathetic divisions. Both control all of these things. They control smooth muscle, cardiac muscle, and glands. And the smooth muscle is found, remember, in lining our digestive tract, lining our respiratory tract, lining our blood vessels. So what the parasympathetic division is going to do is it's going to send signals for your body to respond when you are in a relaxed state or when you are asleep. So like it'll cause you to slow down your breathing rate. Your heart rate will slow. Blood flow to your brain and your skeletal muscles will not be as high, but blood flow to your digestive tract and your urinary tract will be your reproductive tract. The blood flow will increase to those areas. Sympathetic division will cause your heart rate to speed up, will cause your heart rate to increase, your breathing rate to increase, your blood vessels will constrict, this is going to be basically the things that happen whenever you are afraid. It's your fight or flight response. Okay, so make sure that this is, gosh, I don't even know which slide it is. I'm sorry. I can't tell from the screen that I'm looking at. Here, maybe I can scroll it down. Well, it's important enough that I'll just do this. It is slide number 9. So I guess I'm having allergies this morning, but I have to keep on. Slide number 9, which contains the figure 8-1, which is the organization of the nervous system. You definitely need to know these divisions of the nervous system. All right, and here's the definitions. Central nervous system, or CNS, includes the brain and the spinal cord. The PNS, or peripheral nervous system, includes all the neural tissues outside of the CNS. The afferent division refers to the sensory division. It consists of sensory receptors, that these are sensory structures that detect changes in the environment or respond to specific stimuli. So we have receptors for our sensory receptors in our skin. For example, they're touch receptors, pressure, deep pressure receptors, pain receptors, temperature receptors for hot and cold. We also have receptors for our other senses like vision and hearing and balance and smell and taste. These are all somatic receptors. But then there are receptors that are autonomic, that will function with the autonomic nervous system. That, what did we call those? Not somatic, but visceral. So we have visceral receptors that measure things like, I don't know, glucose levels in your blood, carbon dioxide levels in your blood, blood pressure. They're gonna monitor things like that. The efferent division or motor division, and I tend to say sensory and motor rather than afferent and efferent, because it's easier to hear the difference between the words sensory and motor. So the efferent or motor division carries signals away from the central nervous system to muscles and glands so they can respond to the sensory information. All right, the divisions of the efferent or motor division of the nervous system, of the PNS, are going to be the somatic and the somatic nervous system and the autonomic nervous system. Somatic controls skeletal muscle, autonomic controls everything else, smooth muscle, cardiac muscle, and glands. And the autonomic is divided again into sympathetic, which is fight or flight response, and parasympathetic, which is the responses when you are in a relaxed state. Checkpoint question number 3, what would be the effect of damage to the afferent or sensory division of the peripheral nervous system? Well, hopefully you wouldn't damage the entire sensory division of the peripheral nervous system, but any part of it means that you're not going to be able to make your central nervous system, your brain and your spinal cord, aware of certain stimuli. It might be that you're not able to detect the sensation of touch, or maybe you're not able to detect the sensation of pain, or maybe it affects your vision, maybe it affects your hearing. But if you can't get that information to the central nervous system, then your body can't respond to it, which can be very dangerous. All right, so we have neural tissue. There's 2 types of neural tissue, or 2 types of cells that we find in neural tissue. Neuron is just another word for nerve cell. So a neuron is going to be the nerve cell that actually receives information and receives information into structures called dendrites, and sends electrical impulses, sends action potentials or nerve impulses through a structure called an axon. So a neuron is just a nerve cell. It's a basic functional unit of the nervous system. Neurons communicate with one another and with other cells. We have millions of neurons in our body. Most of them are actually in our brain. The neuroglia are the cells that regulate the environment around and support the neurons. We have a lot more neuroglial cells than we do neurons, and neuroglia are able to divide, unlike most neurons which cannot divide. For the general structure of neurons, there are 3 basic parts. There's a cell body, which is just like any typical body cell. It's going to have a nucleus and organelles. The dendrites will project from the cell body, and they will receive signals coming in, and the axon will carry signals away. So, and the axon terminals, which we already learned about in chapter 7, the axon terminals are the endings of the axons, and they're the ones that are involved in a synapse. We learned about the neuromuscular junction already. So that's going to help us understand how a synapse works. And the synapse is where the axon meets up with its target cell. In a neuromuscular junction, it's the axon of a motor neuron, the axon terminal of a motor neuron that meets up with a skeletal muscle. And here is an image of a typical neuron. This one is called a multipolar neuron. You can see the dendrites extending away from the cell body. You can see the axon terminals, and how they are connecting to this target cell. And then this structure called the axon hillock, which is where action potentials are generated. And Niessel bodies, which you find these are areas in the rough endoplasmic reticulum that are going to contribute to the gray color of gray matter.